Hello, I'm Infamous Fear, and this is Period Drama Drama. Today I'm going to be doing something different for Period Drama Drama. I'm going to be reviewing something current. No, not current. What I mean is I'll be reviewing a period drama that is still currently airing. Oh, did I say period drama? I meant small-scale phenomenon.
Fear is for the winter.
Winter is coming.
No, not that! 1, it's a fantasy. 2, I refuse to review anything with a character called Joffrey in it. What a stupid fucking name. No, this is something different. This is the television series that made people care about the terrible woes of a family potentially losing their giant fucking pile of a house and worrying about whether they're wearing the correct clothing to dinner. Stand up, everyone, for the Lord and Lady are coming into the kitchen. This is Downton Abbey. Ah yes, Downton Abbey, the period drama which half of you have been ravenously consuming and the other half of you know nothing about, other than the fact that it might potentially exist. Before I begin, let's get 2 things straight. 1, this is a television series still currently airing, which means that I can't possibly know about stuff that I haven't seen yet. The other is that instead of talking about a movie or an adaptation of a novel, I'm talking about hours and hours and hours of storyline and more characters than there are tiles in a Scrabble bag. So I'll be as brief as possible. Surprisingly, Downton Abbey has absolutely nothing to do with nuns. Rather, it's the tale of a family, the Crawleys, who live in a place called Downton, and the mother and father are Lord and Lady Grantham. No, not Lord and Lady Downton, not Lord and Lady Crawley, Lord and Lady Grantham. The story follows them, their giant house, and the multitude of servants who help to keep this gargantuan thing running. The series starts in 1912 with the sinking of the Titanic and continues on through various events such as the First World War and the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. It explores a variety of different storylines and scenarios specific to the society through its incredibly large cast of characters. Yes, that's right, this is an ensemble cast. You may want to sit down because this is going to take a while. Lord Grantham, Lady Mary, Lady Edith, Lady Sybil, Dowager Countess Violet, Matthew Crawley, Isabel Crawley, Mr. Carson, Mrs. Hughes, Mr. Bates, Mrs. Patmore, Thomas, William... Oh, the hell with it! I'll just have to show you the cast photo, which has attempted to cram as many fucking people into it as possible. So who are these people exactly? The Crawley family consists of Lord Grantham, the benevolent but traditional head of the estate, played by some guy from Bone Kickers, and his wife Cora, an American heiress whom he originally married for her money. They have 3 daughters: Mary, a somewhat cold woman whose eyebrows seem keen to shoot off her face, Edith, the belittled middle child, and Sybil, who is awesome. Mary is ostensibly the main character of the series, and indeed at least 50% of the show is about her and her struggles. And what struggles they are! In the first episode, her fiancé dies and she barely gives a shit.
Really, Edith? Do you have to put on such an exhibition?
She's not.
I was supposed to be engaged to him, for heaven's sake, not you. And I can control myself.
Then you should be ashamed.
In the second episode, she commits an unspeakable horror. She sleeps with a guy! As a result, her life is now destroyed or something. Seriously, this is a huge plot point. The fact that the guy died in her bed probably had something to do with it. Anyway, Mary eventually ends up with Matthew, a distant relative who stands to inherit Downton owing to the fact that he has a set of testicles. They to and fro about whether they're going to get married for so bloody long that any sensible-minded viewer feels like reaching into the screen and shaking both of them by the shoulders, yelling,
For heaven's sake, get on with it!
But the benefit of Downton Abbey is that it's an ensemble cast, so even if you find Mary actually devoid of problems when you compare her to the disabled valet or any of the other peons downstairs, you don't actually have to spend that much time with her. Instead, you can spend time with one of her sisters, and to an extent, I actually like her sisters quite a lot more than her. Edith can be spiteful and vindictive, but she's been consistently overlooked. She can barely get a man to look sideways at her, but at least she does seem to be embracing some form of social change. She learns to drive and has been offered a job writing a newspaper column, whereas Mary seems determined to ignore the fact that times are changing and she won't be able to sit there in a giant house insisting that everyone be proper forever.
But I hope you do feel that Mamma's fortune has been well spent in shoring up an ancient family.
No, you gotta spend it on something.
She won't want to see all this go. Not now she knows it's for her own granddaughter. She won't.
Never mistake a wish for a certainty. Let's hope she won't.
And then there's Sybil, who manages to almost be devoid of flaws, while still having enough complexity in her character to avoid being a Mary Sue. Sybil is kind, she's understanding, she helps a maid better herself and get a job doing something with more long-term benefits than being in service. She sees beyond the barriers of class, and she believes that being a woman doesn't necessarily mean she can't do things. In short, Sybil is one of the best characters of the show, except for maybe...
Are we going to have tea or not?
Ah yes, the Dowager Countess, otherwise known as Maggie Smith, being awesome.
I know he has no fortune, if that's what you mean.
No fortune? He's lucky not to be playing the violin in Leicester Square.
I barely have to explain why she's such excellent comic relief, but almost every remark she says is dryly hilarious.
Sorry about the vase.
Oh, don't be. It was a wedding present from a frightful aunt. I have hated it for half a century.
And while she begins the series pompous and stuck-up, she's quite a strong and adaptable woman, and compared to her son, she's practically a raging progressive.
The aristocracy is not survived by its intransigence.
And now, this is where Downton Abbey really gets interesting. The servants showcase a variety of different attitudes towards their servitude. On the one end of the spectrum are servants like the unbendable Mr. Carson, the butler, who almost refuses to accept any kind of deviation from propriety.
Have we time to serve the coffee or not?
I'm not sure, Mr. Carson. We could have used one of the maids today.
Maids at a shooting lunch? Hardly.
Most of the servants, on the other hand, are a little more flexible. They're kind to each other and willing to serve the family as best as they possibly can, but they appreciate that at times rules need to be bent and the family aren't always making the right decisions. In this category we have, oh god, do you really want me to list them all? I'm trying to be quick! Then finally we have the most interesting of the servants, the ones who know that as a member of the lower classes they've been born already in a ditch and they'll wrangle their way out of the shit by any means possible. Yes, even if it means destroying other people's lives. And so we have our terrible duo, Thomas the footman and O'Brien the lady's maid. These two are the antagonists who drive a good deal of the plot, and from the start they seem as if they're set up to be evil for the sake of being evil. There barely seems any reason for them to be so horrible.
Usually the reaction is, could she be nastier? Because they really like her being nasty.
I found going with that, if you show there's a softer side to the character edges in. People are offended by that. They went, we don't like you being soft. So I get stick for
not
trying
being as nasty.
For going soft.
F. A. T. He says you're too fat.
Plus, there's the matter of the two of them drawing on some old cinematic stereotypes. O'Brien is an uptight, sinister and embittered woman who seems to take the view that if she isn't happy, no one should be.
They were trying to hide it, so I knew it was wrong.
There seems to be almost no other reason for why she acts the way she does.
I've sent Anna to bed with a cold, so I need you to manage the young ladies.
What, all three of them? I'm not an octopus. Why can't Gwen do it?
Because she is not a lady's maid.
I am not a slave.
Just do it, Miss O'Brien, just do it.
She has the ear of her naively trusting mistress and manipulates her and everyone else in the house to conforming to her whims.
They can't expect you to sit by silent as your fortune is stolen away.
Does this remind you of anything? Why, yes, that's right. O'Brien is none other than Mrs. Danvers, the sinister and horrifying housekeeper in Rebecca, who sees Rebecca's replacement and decides to destroy her life. But Mrs. Danvers isn't just an evil housekeeper, she's also an evil lesbian.
Feel this. Look. You can see my hand through it.
Yes, that's right. We come back to it once again. The touch of gay that makes every villain just a little bit more evil. Scar had it. Norman Bates had it.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Keanu Reeves from The Watcher had it.
What I need is you.
Oh, wait. No, I said touch of gay, not heaping helping of homosexuality. But does O'Brien have it? Well, she doesn't seem to have any interest in men. Not even a passing acknowledgement of attractiveness, unlike almost every other woman on the show.
It doesn't look Turkish at all.
Well, he doesn't look like any Englishman I've ever met. Worse luck. I think he's beautiful.
And her devotion to her mistress, while evil, has some slightly strange qualities to it that speak of a possible sexual attraction. And of course, repressing your sexuality for your whole life doesn't exactly make you the most kind and cheery person. Yes, I'm calling it. O'Brien is dangerously close to being an evil lesbian. Why the hell else would I be dressed as her? But of course, when you think of the words evil and gay, O'Brien isn't even the first one to come to mind. No, that would be Thomas, commonly described as the evil gay footman. Among other things, he's responsible for trying to suggest a man is unfit for his job.
I just think you'd know it's not working, Mr. Carson.
Do you mean Mr. Bates is lazy?
Not lazy, exactly. But he just can't carry. He can hardly manage his lordship's cases. You saw how it was when they went up to London for the memorial. I don't believe you'd like to think the house was falling below the way things ought to be.
I would not.
That's all I'm saying.
Trying to get the same man fired by framing him for theft. Making two fellow footmen look clumsy and poor at their jobs. Flirting with a woman who clearly likes him, just to spite the man who has his eye set on her. Ridiculing the other footman for daring to be sad about his mother's death. Hiding the Lord's dog in order to gain the Lord's trust by pretending to find the dog later. Okay, so it's fairly clear that Thomas is a grade A smug manipulative jerk. Sure, he's vindictive, petty and often quite cruel, but can we really call that evil? Well, no, not really. He hasn't killed anyone outside of perhaps the grounds of wartime combat. He hasn't raped anyone. He hasn't committed any major crime or actually destroyed anyone's life, despite trying to a couple of times.
Are you forgetting something?
What? Are you threatening me? Because of a youthful dalliance? A few weeks of madness in a London season? You wouldn't hold that against me, surely.
I would if I have to.
His distasteful actions also have nothing to do with his sexual preference. Thomas is just trying his best with what little power he has to give himself a secure position in life. Sure, he's not exactly doing it through honourable means, but maybe he feels that dishonourable means are all he has.
I don't often feel selfless, but when I listen to you, I do.
The truth is, I actually feel sorry for Thomas. Yes, I said it. I know I have a history of feeling sorry for LGBT characters in period dramas, even if they are raging pricks, but here's why I actually feel genuinely bad for Thomas. He has two major disadvantages. One is that he's from a lower class background. Another is that he's gay. There's no one he can talk to about this.
Well, my life, they've pushed me around just because I'm different. How? Why are you different? Never mind.
It's shameful and illegal for him to be himself, and all around him he must be constantly reminded of how other people are rewarded for conforming to what's normal, and he will always feel like an outcast.
I envy you.
Whatever you say.
No, I mean it. A happy couple and everyone's so pleased for you. Can't imagine what that's like.
He can't be normal, and that's why he puts up walls. He's spiteful towards other people, but he still has the capacity to feel and to love. And despite hiding it, every now and again that capacity emerges, and it never ends well for him.
I just can't see it working, can you? We don't seem to have the basis of a servant-master relationship, do we?
You came here to be with me.
Among other reasons.
Forget yourself!
I'm sorry, sir.
That will teach you to believe what the English say about foreigners. I ought to report you.
I think you must have...
I mistook nothing.
Please, don't send me away. Not yet.
Sir, surely we Sir, I only meant to say that Lieutenant Courtney is depressed.
I will not leave wounded soldiers freezing or sweating under canvas because one junior officer is depressed!
So really, all he has is what little power he can gain through his job, and the strange symbiotic relationship he has with the only other person who is so similarly unfulfilled. But Thomas doesn't deserve sympathy. Sure, he's not evil, but he's not a pathetic character either. He has a force of will and a conviction in himself that is enviable.
I'm not foul, Mr. Carson. I'm not the same as you, but I'm not foul.
He doesn't seem to feel that his sexuality is wrong, and despite the fact that he could be fired or put in prison, when he sees a man he takes a fancy to, he pursues him.
Mr. Barrow's so familiar all the time, isn't he?
I'm glad to hear it. That's a very good sign. If he's taken to you, he'll definitely put in a good word with his lordship.
Because I'd like to tell him to keep his distance.
Great, so now we have to add sexual harassment to Thomas's list of sins. His sexuality is possibly his one weakness, seeing as he has an almost supernatural ability to get everyone else in trouble and keep his own hands clean. But here, he is completely vulnerable. All it takes is one person to complain and he could end up being fired with no references, or at the police station, whereas all I have to worry about in this day and age is a simple no thanks, and yet I can't even... Anyway, what's especially odd about Thomas and his propensity to actually pursue men instead of just looking at them from a distance and feeling deeply ashamed and horribly alone is that people do know. His employer knows. Mr. Bates, the valet, knows.
But it's not as if we didn't all know about Barrow.
That's what I said to Mrs. Hughes.
I mean, if I shouted blue murder every time someone tried to kiss me at Eton, I'd have gone hoarse in a month.
The cook knows.
Thomas is lovely, isn't he?
He's not for you, Daisy. He's not a ladies' man.
Well, isn't it a blessed relief?
Daisy, Thomas is a troubled soul.
O'Brien knows.
Your secret's safe with me.
And yet, none of them seem to care. I'm not sure why. It's probably because nobody's complained, and Thomas is, after all, just a servant. He barely has a reputation to uphold, so who cares what he's into? There's a long history of evil gay characters, as I said before, but seeing as Thomas isn't actually evil, and his homosexuality is one of his more identifiable, humanising elements rather than the source of his wicked ways, he doesn't really fit the role of an evil gay character. Mind you, it doesn't exactly reflect well on the show to have the only gay characters be, well, horrible human beings. But since Thomas is one of the most compelling characters on the show, we'll give him a pass, and fingers crossed that they actually let him have a proper love interest soon, because the poor guy is definitely due for a hug. And for all those who disagree with me and wish that he'd get what's coming to him, well here, have a montage!
How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes, got nowhere to run. The night goes on as I'm fading away. I'm sick of this life, I just wanna scream. How could this happen to me?
Okay, everyone happy? Good! Now we can get back to discussing the show. Downton Abbey, unlike many period dramas made for TV, has budget. It's not nearly so much of a problem nowadays, but older made-for-TV period dramas had this horrible, cheap look to them, whereas Downton Abbey is quite cinematic and visually sumptuous. It's also an oddity because unlike most period dramas, it isn't an adaptation of a period novel. As a result, there's a fair amount of freedom to explore whatever issues the writers want, and there's no requirement to be faithful to a well-known piece of literature. But it still feels very much like a traditional period drama. It's not full of sex and violence, unlike other things. The costumes are brilliant and change subtly over the 8 years in which the series takes place thus far. Clothing traditions are visible even when they aren't remarked upon, such as the cast going into historically accurate mourning whenever there's a death. Hell, dressing appropriately for the occasion is even a minor plot point.
Why are you not in white tie?
Darling, please forgive me. I'm afraid they never sent my tails back.
You're not in white tie either. What have you come as?
I'm so sorry. Thomas has lost all my dress shirts.
Oh, do you think I might have a drink? Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were a waiter.
A common criticism of Downton Abbey is that it puts far too much drama in period drama, and that some of the plot elements are melodramatic and ridiculous, such as characters dropping dead left, right and centre. But rather than only dealing with big, sweeping changes, often Downton looks at the little things, things which wouldn't even be an issue in today's society, such as who wins a flower show, wearing the right jacket to dinner, no one can reveal my dark and embarrassing past as a pier-side entertainer. Oh god damn it, I can't find those shirts. Yes, there's a fair share of big things happening, like someone dropping dead in someone else's bed, wartime deaths, the Titanic sinking, multiple marriages and a miscarriage. But really, when you think about the fact that the series covers a time frame of 8 years, it's perfectly plausible for this many major events to take place. And when it comes to characters dying suddenly of Spanish flu, it's hardly a soap opera plot. People really did die suddenly. The same goes for characters dying or being injured in wartime. It's what you'd expect. And when it comes to dramatic events and ridiculous coincidences, Downton Abbey has nothing on period dramas adapted from historical novels. The average Dickens novel is full of more contrived coincidences than your average cross-dressing comedy. In Oliver Twist, the young Oliver is forced to burgle a house and the victim of the burglary turns out to be his long-dead mother's long-lost sister. In Jane Eyre, Jane is lost in a moor and stumbles upon a dwelling. She's taken in by the family who lives there, and what would you know, they turn out to be long-lost relatives of her, and she's inherited a great deal of money. Downton Abbey's more far-fetched plot points have nothing on that. Julian Fellowes, the writer of Downton Abbey, created a movie in 2001 which explored a similar setting, that of a great country house, with a similar upstairs and downstairs dynamic. Gosford Park, however, could only explore things remarkably quickly, with snippets rather than storylines, and in some senses it was far less fair than Downton.
Why has Freddie Nesbit brought that awful common little wife of his? I mean, Isabel only asked him because a gun dropped out. There's no excuse to inflict her on us all.
Almost all of the upstairs characters are completely loathsome, and several of the servants aren't much better.
What's the matter with you?
Nothing. Only I thought I'd be doing Mr. Novello, that's all.
No, you won't get to see him in his underdrawers.
In Downton Abbey, the people have more development and humanising moments. There's probably only 1 or 2 characters out of dozens who have never done a single good thing, and most people are flawed but essentially good. In some senses, it's nostalgic for an irrelevant time and legitimises the English class system, but at least it attempts to showcase some of the inherent flaws in class-based discrimination. And to an extent, it's nice to watch something that has barely any relevance to modern society, so that you can laugh at what ridiculous things people were worried about, and feel thankful that some of the horrible issues they had to struggle with are no longer issues at all. Downton definitely isn't for everyone, but on the whole it's a very well-made television series. The acting is really quite good, and there's a wealth of different themes and storylines explored, meaning that there'll be something to please almost anyone who watches the show, including people you really wish wouldn't watch the show. But what can I say? There's a reason why this is one of the most popular period dramas out there, and there's a reason why it has an audience reaching far beyond that of the traditional bonnet drama fan. And if you'll excuse me, I've got to go. I think it's time that I took some life lessons from Thomas. So, you want to come back to my place?